Hi, teacher and classmates. I am going to talk about questions and answers in Handout 3, Assignment 3. To start off this, question number 1 says, explain two aspects to take into consideration when determining what item types you should use in your test. Aspect number 1 is this the main aspect to consider when determining what type to use in that is the teachers need to align the objectives and indicators of learning with the type of item. This means that the type of item the teacher decides to include needs to match and work with the objectives and indicators of learning. If the teacher chooses the type before taking into consideration the objectives and indicators, the item won't be clear enough and it will not work with the content and skills previously developed during class. In other words, what is being graded with the wrong kind of item selected, it is not the same as what the students learn in class. Aspect number 2 is that another important aspect when choosing an item is to introduce the students to the type of items they will face during the test. In addition, the teachers are obligated to get the students to know the items that the teacher will grade them on. This is to help the students to develop the skills they need for the test and also to practice as much as possible for the test with the selected items previously introduced by the teacher in class. Question number 2 is why is it important to write a clear instruction to write clear instructions in tests? Provide two clear reasons. Reason number 1 is that it is important to write clear instructions in tests because it allows the students to be certain about what is expected of them in the test. The test instructions should be made with what the students have already learned in class. If test makers do not provide clear instructions with simple language, students will not be completely sure what the teacher expects from their performance in the test, which leads to misunderstandings and incompleteness of objectives and indicators of learning. And then reason number 2 is that it is also important to write clear instructions in the tests for students to accomplish the test objectives. Short and concise sentences are helpful to be clear about what it is being requested. When writing clear instructions for a test, it is important and useful for teachers to use a checklist to self evaluate written instructions. Detailed instructions are important because they allow the students to comprehend, provide support, and to provide guidance to students with various needs. And then question number 3 says that in your digital text on page 72, there is a complementary activity. Read through the activity, complete it, and share your answers on 3 aspects to improve in the instructions of the item given. The 3 aspects to improve in the item given are, from my side, are that the first one is that the first recommendation would be to improve the item instructions to reflect as, for example, identification item, look at the picture and identify the body parts. Use the word bank to find the correct names. Then, write the name of each body part on the corresponding number lines. 5 points, 1 point for each correct response. The second recommendation would be to add a list or word bank of parts for the students to choose from to write it in the line number that corresponds. And then the word bank, for example, would be like foot, arm, mouth, the head. And then the third recommendation is to add numbers to each of the lines for each body part. This is to make it clear for students to count the number of answers they need to write to match the points. Question number 4. Describe one type of oral test could be used at elementary school level. Explain how this test could be useful for students at elementary school level. Role plays are a good type of oral test. This type allows the students to work with the partner to act and have a short conversation based on the topic in class. This type of oral test helps to enhance a student's soft skills. In addition, it develops the student's confidence in oral scenarios. And social skills are another aspect that kids in elementary school may help to promote confidence, respect, real world scenarios, and creativity. Then, question number 5. Do a little bit of research on your own and share 2 tips for making tests, including tips for the different item tip types. The 2 tips that I could find and I find very useful are a good tip for making tests depending on the item type. It may be very helpful to include a word solved problem or sentence example. This may be helpful for the student to understand what it is being expected from them. What seems to be clear to the writer may be unclear to someone else, according to Clay 2001, page 3. Another tip is that for making tests is to check for accuracy. This means that the teachers should make sure that using other tests written and created by other teachers may not be a good idea. Many teachers do it to save time, but tests like test objectives may not match and look for the same responses and expectations from the students and their answers. Instructors should be cautious about using tests written by others, according to Clay 2001, page 3. And that would be all from my assignment 3. Thank you.